revelation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to today's live stream, Rudy's Revelation Podcast, finding revelation in the news and meaning in media. So today, it is December 31st, Wednesday. Happy New Year. Hope everyone has big plans coming up. May not have a episode tomorrow, so stay tuned. Probably Friday, though. So today, we're going to be talking about the Democratic fraud iceberg that is now being exposed. The federal government is aware and taking action immediately. Some other blue states are circling the wagons, making sure that they're not investigated next because there's lots to be investigated. Also, NATO is undermining the peace efforts in Ukraine. Recent attacks, assassination attempts in Russia really have to deal with the peace effort that Donald Trump is trying to pursue in Ukraine. Why would you want to pursue peace when there's profit to be made? Who knows? Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. We're going to try to cut through the bullshit. Be sure to join me every day, Monday through Friday, live stream 10 a.m. All right, I was going to get into the word of the day today. I want to try to bring that back. It is objectivity. Everybody knows what objectivity is. I should really explain it, but to have a reasonable take on the world, you have to read different sources. You have to think different things. You have to be empathetic, sympathetic to the point of view of your adversary, your opposition, your opponent, whatever. But remember that the truth is always somewhere in between, not necessarily in the middle. Your position could be more right than someone else's position, but it is likely or certainly should be tempered by what the other person is saying. So I don't have that slide with me today. I was going to bring up Merriam-Webster's definition of objectivity or being objective. Maybe I'll get that done before the end of the podcast today. So we're here every day in the morning to get you the most news and analysis in the shortest amount of time. So yesterday was very long-winded. Today, there are less stories, less news to cover. About 28, 29 headlines to go through in the next hour or so. So without further ado, let's get to it. First up, we're going to go to the Associated Press. Trump administration says it's freezing child care funds to Minnesota after a series of fraud schemes. Even the AP doesn't say alleged. President Donald Trump's administration announced on Tuesday that it is freezing child care funds to Minnesota and demanding an audit of some daycare centers after a series of fraud schemes involving government programs in recent years. Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services Jim O'Neill said on the social media platform X that the move is in response to blatant fraud that appears to be rampant in Minnesota and across the country. across the country. And there's the clue. So they're not even saying allege. Most of it's been proven out already. And there's a lot of things connected to it. So the recent investigations by Nick Shirley and even previous investigations in Minnesota just uncovered the tip of the iceberg. The amount of government funding that goes to specific groups is really just a slush fund to grease constituents and donors and eventually get kickbacks to the politicians. Now, that part hasn't been proven out yet, but we're going to get to that. Let's just get back to the story, though. Minnesota governor pushed back on X, saying fraudsters are a serious issue, and they're your constituency, that the state has spent years cracking down on, but that this move is part of Trump's long game. What exactly does he mean by that? He's trying to insinuate, he says, Trump is politicizing the issue to defund programs that help Minnesotans. The problem with social programs, doesn't matter what it is, if it's SNAP, if it's child care, if it's health care, whatever the government spends money on, there's sure to be a grift. Sometimes by the very people who institute the programs. Or they institute the programs specifically so they can get kickbacks in some way, shape, or form, or they can direct where that money is going and benefit through investment. The New York Times responds, Health Department pauses child care funding to Minnesota, cites state's fraud scandal. The pause affects a funding stream that provides $185 million in annual aid to the state's daycare centers as federal investigations into fraud in Minnesota's social services programs continue. Health and Human Services Department said on Tuesday it had paused its child care payments to Minnesota days after posting a widely circulated video that added new accusations to a fraud scandal in the state's social services program and led conservatives to call for a government crackdown. So last night on episode 132 of Tuesdays with Perry, we discussed this at length. You should check it out. Where we talked about Nick Shirley's report and also subsequently one of the learning centers, actually the Leering Center, as it was put on the sign in a misprint, they fixed the sign, so now it says learning, and miraculously on Monday there were kids at the daycare. Well, we've seen this before, and there was a Fox News report earlier in 2015, 2018, where surveillance video showed parents showing up with kids to sign up, but then they left with the kids. They didn't leave them there. Keep in mind that the Somali community, most of the women stay home with the children. So there's no need there for daycare. They're just bilking the system because the funds are available for daycare. My issue is obviously with federally funded daycare. I think it has to be more specific. I'm not going to go into a diatribe about it, but if a workforce needs women to get into the workforce or to survive, the women need to work, then the child deserves state-funded health child care. Okay. But if one of the parents is staying at home, well, why do you need to provide services for those people, those kids? You don't. It's overcompensation. And that's always with the bleeding heart liberal. They feel instead of think, oh my God, we got to do something about this certain issue, these certain people. And then they start shoveling money at it, at least the politicians do. And a lot of the money gets lost to fraud. In every government program, that's the case. And it's not just in social programs. Military contracts, we saw the same thing, obviously, as well. Getting back to the story, though, The decision blocks funding stream that provides $185 million in annual aid to Minnesota daycare centers. More than a dozen schemes have come to light in Minnesota in recent years, many of them involving people of Somali origin. Prosecutors say the schemes have cost taxpayers billions of dollars. The scandal has rattled Minnesota politics and drawn ire of the White House. So there are a lot of people in the crosshairs, and we're going to get to that. But first, more about the federal government, the Trump administration's response to the scandal. Reuters reports U.S. government audits cases of Somali U.S. citizens for potential denaturalization. The issue here is obviously, oh my God, you're going to take away the citizenship of foreign-born Somalis. Well, that's the law. You certainly can do that. You certainly can revoke citizenship by foreign-born or previously foreign nationals who commit crime. So I don't think they're going to be going after people who haven't committed any crime or proven or convicted of any crime, certainly. But there's more. The New York Post. Minnesota daycare scandal sparks concern over election policy that allows a voter to vouch for others. It's made for fraud. Controversial Minnesota election policy that allows a single registered voter to vouch for up to 8 people seeking same-day registration is under fire amid the state's massive fraud scandal tied to the Somali community there. Under Minnesota law, the registered voter must go with the other person or people they are vouching for to the polling place and sign an oath verifying their address and presumably that they're eligible to vote. A registered voter from the precinct can go with you to the polling place to sign an oath confirming your address. This is known as vouching. A registered voter can vouch to up to 8 voters. Well, of course, this stinks of fraud. And all these little things, including mail-out ballots, open the door for fraud. And the reason they're put into place, and obviously not repealed, like the mail-out ballots, were put into place because of COVID, because of the fear of going to a polling center, you might catch a terrible disease and die, which that in itself was a lie. But now the pandemic is over, they kept that into place. Why? Particularly in blue states. Why? Because it allows for fraud, and fraud is the key to Democrat politics. It's illicit. Their political behavior is illicit in a number of different ways. It includes murder. Also, I'm not going to get into the fact that 2 state politicians were murdered, and they happen to be Democrats that voted against providing health care for illegal aliens. That's tip of the iceberg stuff. And unfortunately, these Democratic politicians, while they were defending their votes that angered many, they also were mentioning other gimmies to foreign nationals and alluding to the fraud that we're investigating right now. All right, Newsweek has the headline, Tim Walz's resignation calls grow over Minnesota fraud scandal. Republican lawmakers at the state and federal level have called on the governor, who is the Democratic Party's vice presidential nominee in 2024, to resign. Walz, again, echoing what he said previously, is worked for years to crack down on fraud. How'd that work out for you? Not really. It's a funny thing because during the campaign, he said, if you look at our Somali community for fraud over the money they're getting, that's racist. Next headline up is from Just the News. Representative Omar is at center stage in massive Minnesota fraud scandal for her support of abused programs. Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, was at the forefront of expanding federal funding for pandemic-era food and child care programs. Those programs are now at the center of fraud allegations among the Somali immigrant community in her home state, and she is Somali. Omar, who represents a congressional district with a sizable Somali population in Minneapolis, and don't forget, this is what happens, right? They vote as a block, they vote their own in, then they build walls around what they're doing, and they keep it up and try to grow their political power and their area, obviously. So Omar championed the Meals Act in 2020 as the height of the pandemic and offered an amendment that would allow the federal government the ability to grant waivers to state governments for increased costs. So allowing it to renew automatically with additional funds for inflationary whatever. And the problem is in the Biden administration, this was very detrimental because if they were increasing the cost of the funds due to inflation was so high that they were getting a lot more money. Story goes on to say, Omar introduced the act with the goal of removing oversight barriers to the expansion of federally funded state meal programs amid the school closures of the COVID-19 pandemic, making it ripe for fraud. The legislation allowed the Department of Agriculture to waive requirements, including increased federal costs, as I just mentioned. It was because of these waivers that Minnesota is now facing scrutiny for allegedly mismanaging federal funds, including by distributions to the Feeding Our Future program, which is linked to fraudulent activity by more than 70 defendants, all Somali. Federal prosecutors say this particular scheme costed taxpayers $250 million after defendants allegedly appropriated meals program funding for personal use or to send overseas. Just the News again says, well, now you see the wagon circling from other Democratic states. Washington State is now drawing scrutiny following DHS raid over child care center fraud in Minnesota. The mass child care center fraud have inspired scrutiny over similarly licensed businesses in Washington State, while the State Department of Children, Youth, and Family Services is encouraging individuals to report suspected fraud to a 24/7 hotline. The DHS raids in Minnesota were precipitated by a video, Nick Shirley's video, posted on X, alleging systemic fraud regarding licensed child care centers that did not exist. Well, didn't have kids there. I mean, there were people there, but all the people that there did is shut out Nick Shirley. They didn't provide a manager to answer questions. They didn't do anything that a normal place would do. Oh, here's the manager's contact number. You can call them after 3 o'clock or whatever. Didn't do anything, just rushed people out. And that's not what you do if you're up front. The federal authorities estimate the fraud could have cost taxpayers as much as $9.5 billion. Story goes on to say the Department of Child and Youth and Families provides a variety of early learning grants in addition to covering child care for eligible families under 2 child care subsidy programs. Child welfare, child care pays providers on behalf of families with children receiving services such as children in foster care, while the Working Connections Child Care pays for child care on behalf of eligible families. And that's why I talk eligible when I was talking before about what was happening in Minnesota. Eligible, like you have to prove that both parents are working specifically for purpose, for, to keep a roof over your head. And, if your husband makes $6 million a year and you're working just to have something to do during the day, you don't qualify. Obviously, there is a income threshold with most social programs where you have to report less than $10,000 or what have you. Story goes on to say, if for some reason during an inspection there's no child there, it would be noted and forwarded to our fraud hotline, says the Director of Communications, Nancy Gutierrez from DCYF. She added that they also conduct random auditing of the businesses, which they compare attendance to compare the attendance reported with what the agency has on file, including the names of specific children if they see a match with eligible families. Same thing, right? They go there to see if the services they claim in the application for funds, those services are actually being provided. And that's what was happening in the Somali community in Minnesota, because they felt that they were being protected by politicians. The question is, were they? Washington, I don't think, is as stupid. Maybe they think the Midwesterners were just too kind and too stupid that they could be taken advantage of. Tim Walz was certainly too kind and too stupid. Or maybe he knew very well, but just claims to be stupid or acts like a moron. That's an easy thing to do for him. But as Alex Jones often says, it's not because of incompetency or stupidity. They do it on purpose, and then the stupidity is plausible deniability. Whoopsie. Oh, we were trying to do the right thing, and billions of dollars were stolen. So the administration is going after, or certainly investigating fraud in all the states, but there's more. Court allows, this is Reuters, court allows Trump-backed cuts to Planned Parenthood's Medicaid funding in 22 states. Now, I'm not even saying that fraud occurs here, but I'm sure it does. This is different. The problem, here's my take on it. I believe abortion should be legal, but I don't believe that federal taxpayers certainly should be paying for abortions. I'm sure there are plenty of liberal donors. You can get George Clooney to donate to Planned Parenthood to pay for poor black women's abortions. Right? The federal taxpayer shouldn't have to pay for that. Next up, here's some breaking news for you. New York Post. Wife of Jill Biden's ex-husband found dead inside Delaware home after domestic dispute call. A 64-year-old woman married to Jill Biden's ex-husband was found dead in her Delaware home after law enforcement responded to investigate a domestic dispute late Sunday, authorities said. Now, I need to stop right here and just say, was there a domestic dispute? It didn't say that the husband was taken into custody. If there was a domestic dispute, obviously he would be a suspect. And then it would be taken into custody, at least for questioning. Linda Stevenson was found unresponsive on the living room floor of her Oak Hill home she shared with her husband, Bill Stevenson, who was married to the former First Lady between 1970 and 1975. Around 11:15 p.m., when officers responded to a reported family clash, she was pronounced dead at the scene. You didn't know, Jill Biden was married to her 77-year-old ex-husband for 5 years before splitting in 1974 and divorcing a year later. She's married Senator Joe Biden, Democrat of Delaware, 2 years after that. If you didn't know the scandal around Joe Biden. So it's alleged Joe Biden was having an affair with Jill Biden. Then Joe Biden's wife mysteriously crashes in a car crash, killing, I believe, 2 of his kids. Hunter survived. And then he was free to marry his mistress, Jill Stevenson at the time. Jill Biden. Bill Stevenson previously accused his ex-wife of having an affair with a Democrat before they split. He has claimed for years that he and his then wife grew close to Joe in 1972 while working on his first campaign for the Senate. Mysteriously enough, that same year, tragedy struck when Joe's first wife, Neelia, and an infant daughter were killed in a car crash. So it was just one child. Excuse me. Bill said, this is Bill Stevenson, said he first suspected the affair in 1974, but the Bidens, who had been married since 1977, have publicly said that they met on a blind date in 1975 after Joe became a widower and Jill's first marriage ended. Well, isn't that convenient? Nobody, if you knew anything about this, and I have known this for a long time, I never believed any of this. And even at the time, it was quite a scandal because people were sus about the whole friggin' thing. Don't forget what Bill Stevenson is saying is that he suspected the affair well before they split. Now, when did they split? They split in 1974 and divorced a year later, but Bill Stevenson previously accused his wife of having an affair with a Democrat before calling it quits. So they split in 1974. Just doesn't make sense to me. All right, I have a little bit of out of order news here. I was looking to go to this earlier. This is a PJ Media article. The massive fraud scandal no one is talking about. This is what happened in Minnesota is teeny compared to the fraud in California under Gavin Newsom. Heck, it makes Minnesota look like pocket change. Indeed, a fresh 92-page bombshell from the California state auditor lays it all out. This latest report was issued by the state auditor, and that's a nonpartisan position. The state auditor now puts 8 state agencies on the high-risk list of agencies to watch out for things like fraud and mismanagement, as well as waste. Newsmax correspondent Heather Myers revealed last week. Here's a look at that 92-page report. Newly added to the high-risk list in California's food stamp program, like I said, SNAP. If the state doesn't get the improper payments under control, it could cost an extra $2.5 billion. Also on there is the Department of Finance, which is tasked with giving out COVID relief funds. Well, there we have problems immediately. Anything related to COVID. Critics say $32 billion of what was taken by fraudsters. $32 billion of COVID relief fund. And as I mentioned previously, it has to do with either donors or constituency, not just fraudsters. Then there were infrastructure issues like California's deteriorating dams and also the high-speed rail train that already cost taxpayers $18 billion without a single section of track completed. Of course it's fraud. Those sort of things like infrastructure that where the work isn't done obviously goes to donors. But the stuff like what's happening in Minnesota could be donors, but more than likely constituency. And there's plenty of that going on in California as well. More California news. Washington Times says California delays revoking 17,000 commercial driver's licenses until March after immigrants sue. Well, what's going on here is after the White House and many of us, many conservatives, people on the right said, hey, foreign nationals shouldn't have commercial driver's licenses, and certainly illegal immigrants shouldn't have commercial driver's licenses. And the fact that illegal aliens were responsible for a spat, of serious manslaughter involving semi-trucks, where they held these commercial driver's licenses, which they shouldn't have. California said, don't worry, we're revoking 17,000 because the license term outlasts the term for their legal residency, which means their visas expired before their license expired. So what they were going to do is revoke them and issue new ones that expired when their visa expired, because that's what was requested by the State Department. But now the drivers sue, and it's all going to get worked out. Hopefully, I doubt it gets worked out, but it should get worked out because, as I said, foreign nationals shouldn't have commercial driver's licenses. It's ridiculous. I think I paired up those two stories because they were both California, but California should be looked at for fraud. It's an issue. It's always an issue when you're giving money out or you're giving anything out, anything of value. There's going to be fraud. Anywhere where there's money, there's fraud. It's like I always said, money makes people funny. Never trust people when it comes to money, because it doesn't matter if they're a close friend or a loved one or relative or whatever. It's like Schmeagol, the Gollum there in Lord of the Rings. When he gets crazy when he gets near the ring, my precious. That's the way people get when money. I mean, they'll kill supposed loved ones for money. Happened to me, my own brother. Tried to screw me. All right, next article coming up. Washington Examiner, Trump's total control of the border is the success story of 2025. 2 years ago this month, more than 300,000 illegal immigrants were stopped by Customs and Border Protection officers along the southwest border of the United States, and almost all of them were quickly released into the country. At the time, we were told by even supposedly conservative media outlets that there was nothing the Biden administration could do to stop the migrant flood, and that only bipartisan legislation and more money, by the way, from Congress could solve the problem. Oops. That turned out to be completely false. New legislation was not needed at all. Well, it's always a bunch of bullshit. It's always the narrative versus the truth, and whether or not Democrats really believe in what they're saying, or just figuring we know best how to govern. Let us at the money, and we'll take care of it. I never trust people that said, let me take care of it. I hate that turn of phrase. What do you mean by take care of it? Take care of me? No, take care of it. The money. All right, just the news. I went over like 20 minutes yesterday, so I don't want to do that today. Just the news, Iowa Democrat wins state Senate seat, blocking GOP from regaining supermajority in the state legislature. Hardman, a member of the West Des Moines City Council, won the left-leaning suburban seat, which was left vacant in October after its incumbent, who was also a Democrat, died from illness. I take issue with this. It's a Democrat seat. Why in a suburbia of Des Moines, why this happens? Don't forget the Des Moines Public School District was where they hired the illegal alien who was under a deportation order and had several felonies, including possession of a handgun, and was possession of a handgun in a school district vehicle while he was arrested. But in any case, the Democrats got to block the supermajority, and that's what Republicans should be trying to do, is secure supermajorities in any state they can, because the Democrats always will put all resources into to start in Republican states to block a supermajority and secure a Democrat supermajority in the states they can, because once you go there, you're never going back. It's the same thing with a communist. If you ever vote for a communist, he'll never be voted out of office. Look at Maduro. Okay, Cesar Chavez in Venezuela was truly elected by the people, but once in, you're never going to get him out. And that's the same thing with Democrats. They're socialists to the core, but their fiscal policies just don't stand up. Next headline here from Just the News. As long as I'm on a Democratic tear, the Democrats plan to reconvene a January 6th panel for anniversary hearing to try to reclaim narrative. Holy shit. So you better not vote for Democrats in the midterm. Perry and I were talking last night at episode 132 of Tuesdays with Perry about this and about the Republicans' chances of maintaining a majority, federal majority, after the midterms. We better pull out all the stops to try to disengage the election fraud, etc. Police, mail-in ballots, and polling centers, because they're going to reconvene a January 6th panel. Come on. Everything we know now. On a note about this DC pipe bomber, he's maybe not a patsy, but he's a controlled individual. They always pick on simple-minded people to get them, and now they're getting him to admit that he did it, but there are a lot of inconsistencies with his story. And then the most disturbing thing for me was that in recent video I saw, it could clearly be seen that he was a black man with glasses. Now, was that altered to fit his description, or was this known all along, and why didn't they say it's obviously a black man with glasses? Also, if you want to be hidden, why would you wander around the city quite a bit before planting the bombs, then looking up in the sky? Then why would you wear a gray hoodie if you want to be hidden? Why did the cops know exactly where to look for the pipe bombs when they were planted? Why was this individual waving at Capitol Police cruisers as they drove by? Why didn't, if he's a smart kid, supposedly, why didn't he turn off his cell phone? If you don't want to be tracked, turn off your cell phone. In any case, let's just go to the story. House Democrats are reconvening a special committee for a hearing to mark the 5th anniversary of the January 6th Capitol riot and criticize the Trump administration for trying to whitewash history. Dear colleague, wrote House Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, said Democratic members of the January 6th Select Committee will hold a special hearing on the 50th anniversary of the Capitol building assault to honor first responders and expose the election deniers who hold highest level positions and influence within the executive branch. What the fuck? We all know what it is. And it's not delusional thinking. Who's Ray Epps, right? How many intelligence operatives and assets were in the crowd? We don't know. If anything, it was a riot, trespassing. What was more egregious, certainly, than the riot was the response. First of all, the media helped, politicians and media helped blow it out of proportion. And that was the excuse for the overbearing law enforcement response by the DOJ, which basically you're going after people and having FBI raids, kicking down doors and stuff for people that are charged with misdemeanor criminal trespass. Okay? There was not such a response to the riots in 2020. He also goes, we will also present a panel of members who wish to share their personal experiences from that horrific day. Really? It was not a horrific day. It was a riot. It was a rally where over 1 million people, around 1 million people attended. Several 100,000, if you want to be conservative. Only 10,000 went to the mall, went to the Capitol, less than 10,000, and only a couple thousand trespassed. And all those people were investigated and had criminal charges. They all caught a case. Ridiculous. I'm going to try to go on time here. Mediaite. Next headline is from Mediaite. George Clooney torches CBS, ABC for caving to Trump lawsuits and trashes Barry Weiss. Now, this is near and dear to my heart because I worked in journalism. George Clooney never worked in journalism. So fuck you, George. You didn't know what the fuck you're talking about. Barry Weiss was brought in for fiscal reasons, but also for reputational reasons to fix CBS because of their blatant bias, not only blatant bias, but really unethical approaches in efforts to try to smear Trump. Backfired on them and they lose lawsuits. Why did they lose the lawsuit? Because they were guilty of an intentionally trying to portray Trump in a bad light, certainly unethically, and slanderous. So I guess maybe George Clooney, if he's in Paris, he could shoot on over to Ireland and visit Rosie because they're fucking delusional. What do you mean caving to lawsuits? They're not caving to lawsuits, just like BBC. They're guilty of organized conspiracy to defame someone who's running for president of the United States and someone who is president of the United States. Why? Because they don't like his policies. Why? Because they're populist. What is populism? It is the opposite of elitism. More from the media. Federalist has the headline here, the 10 biggest media hoaxes of 2025. Excuse me. Elon the fascist. I'm going to zip through these. Elon the fascist. We all know what that was. Elon is not a fascist. You don't even know what fascism is. Anti-Hegseth campaign. From the day President Trump tapped him to lead the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth has been under a barrage of media smear campaigns and hoaxes, of course, including that he's a drunk. I mean, they did the same thing with Brett Kavanaugh. They have no ethical, moral boundaries. The Democrats will say anything to win political office and entrench their specific ideological bureaucracy and obviously secure the funding that comes with all of that. Joe Biden wasn't okay after all. So if you didn't know what this was, of course, after Trump got elected and after the establishment threw Joe Biden under the bus or tried to, then they go, oh, well, there was some mental failing there. Of course there was. I mean, even before he was elected, we could see that. Next up is the Maryland man. We went over this yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday, about Kilmar Abrega Garcia, where they said, oh, he's just a Maryland dad. He's a nice guy. He's an illegal immigrant, and so you're deported. No, wait. Because a court said he couldn't be deported back to El Salvador because he feared for his life. And so there he's in legal limbo, because deporting somebody to a place other than their origin is legally problematic. Whitewashing the Russiagate scandal, we know this. You know, why don't the Democrats reconvene a panel to see if Trump really is colluding with Russia? Sydney Sweeney's Good Genes. If you don't know the commercial, the actress and model Sydney Sweeney, young, beautiful white girl. Apparently, she said she had good genes, which is a double entendre. And they said that's white supremacy, not just I have good genes because I'm fucking beautiful. Smearing Charlie Kirk. My wife had a Turning Point sticker magnet taken from her car yesterday in a parking lot. Luckily, her car wasn't defaced, but still. People are crazy. People are crazy. The reality is that if you ever listen to Charlie Kirk, and I was not a fan of Charlie Kirk, but I listened to what he said, perfectly reasonable debate. He puts up his opinion, he backs it up with facts. But all they know is that he's a fascist, he's a racist, and they go with that. It's the same thing with Trump. They never listen to what the guy says. They're not informed. They're misinformed, first of all, and very likely part of a disinformation campaign orchestrated by the intelligence community, parroted by the mainstream media, and indoctrinated by the peers of the liberal lunatics who don't want to read. They don't want to hear anything you have to say. All they do is can hurl ad hominem. Why? Because they don't like you because something their peers said. They're not supportive enough of whatever it is you like, LGBTQ or Palestine or whatever. I don't have to like what you like. I don't have to support your lifestyle. I don't have to do any of that shit. All I have to do is respect your individual liberty. Excusing leftist violence, right? Audrey Hale, Tyler Robinson, New Year's Eve bomb plot, the ICE shooting conspiracy, the the trans cult people, the rationalists, the hell were they called? The attacks on Tesla during the campaign. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's like maybe you could pick out one right-leaning attack. I mean, you can't. Democrat lawfare. Never heard of it, of course. Democrats, yeah, lawfare. It's not even a word. Yeah, right. What did I just previously say? Is that Democrats will do anything without any regard to, without any ethical concern or moral concern. They will do anything they can to get into power. Trumped up charges, murder, uh, uh, nurturing and goading their constituency into political attacks. Also, we have the war on SCOTUS. Yes, SCOTUS is evil. We have to dilute it by adding justices and all this other stuff. Oh, that they take gifts from friends of theirs. Like Clarence Thomas has a friend that took him on a trip. Okay. So what?
Less than 3% of you people read books.
Our next headline, PJ Media, The Lost Art of Reading. The science of reading, prominent curriculum used in America to teach children to read, is called the science of reading, filled with rules, formulas, metrics. Educators have distilled teaching literacy into something so futuristic that Ray Bradbury would be inspired. So if you know what the science of reading is, it's not about reading. It's about retaining the information that you read. That's the science of reading. So they're trying to teach kids, young students, how to get information, retain it, and so when they're tested on it, they could do better, right? And that helps with memory. People that read have better memories. People that read are more educated just in general. People that read have a better vocabulary, obviously. People that read can speak better. Me, not so much. Which brings us to the next slide here. PJ Media says, accept that fiction can teach you something. I prefer fiction to nonfiction. I don't. I prefer nonfiction to fiction simply because if you're going to read to educate yourself, I find nonfiction obviously way better, but also for me more interesting. I don't need to, if I want to see a fictitious story, I'll watch a movie. The thing that fiction can teach you is if you read certain coded fiction, like let's say 1984, or how about Animal Farm? Is Animal Farm really about barnyard animals talking? There's more to fiction, and I think that's what the author here is trying to say. There's more to fiction than meets the eye. But not all fiction can teach you something. I mean, you should read Brave New World, obviously, or 1984. People always say that's a novel fiction, not a manual, an instruction guide. But you can certainly learn from that because a lot of times authors are trying to tell you something, but they don't want to come out and blatantly say that this is how things work. Speaking of how things work, we're going to go to the next article here from the New York Times. Mamdani will be the first New York City mayor to use the Quran at his swearing in. Zohran Mamdani, New York City's first Muslim mayor, will use 2 family Qurans and one that belonged to the writer Arturo Schomburg at his 2 swearing-in ceremonies. Here's my problem. 2 problems is, first of all, if you ever saw Barack Obama get sworn in, he didn't put his hand on a Bible. And one time he wasn't sworn in, apparently, and then he had a secret swearing in where he had his hand on a Masonic Bible or something like that. There was all that going on. There's a lot of things to understand about swearing in. You should also make sure it's a Bible or a Quran. But the thing is with Muslims, really like Jews also, but I'm talking specifically about Muslims here, is that their doctrine, and in the Quran it says they can lie and steal and do immoral things to the infidel. So because you swear on a Quran, that doesn't mean you're going to do what's right for non-Muslims in the community. And what he's going to do, obviously, is what all Democrats do, tribal warfare, starting with like what Ilhan Omar does. You benefit your people, your community. The blacks do this, black politicians do this too. Instead of helping everybody, all the electorate in your district, no, we're going to specifically help these people. And I would even say it would be okay for you to say, oh, I'm going to help all poor people, because that class of people cuts through race, religion, whatever. It's everybody. I was talking about this yesterday in terms of American citizens. Well, that's everybody of all color and creed. But I think you're going to see some specific catering to certain groups of people, very possibly the Muslim community. But we'll see. Perry and I, again, last night in episode 132 of Tuesdays with Perry, talked about this at length last night as well, about what's going to happen in New York City. We'll have to wait and see. But if London is any template to what's going to happen, it's not going to be good. It's the beginning of socializing, beginning of building a socialist America. Next headline up, Market Watch, over 6 million Americans on Medicare will now need to get prior authorization from AI for these 17 procedures. A 6-state pilot program will target wasteful care under Medicare. And I'm all for cutting waste and auditing and investigations. I think audits should be a regular thing, especially in a free society. I think everything dealing with money, the Federal Reserve, the gold reserves, the oil reserves, all social programs should have automatic auditing without a doubt. Any outlay of government funds other than, certain projects, even in the military, but other certain, when you build roads and stuff, or grants for construction and so forth and so on, maybe those should be audited too. But I think certainly social programs where the money just disappears. The thing about spending is, what's the return? If you're giving money to people and it's leaving the country, or you're not getting any productivity return out of it, it's wasted money. Let's get into some foreign news. Post-millennial Canadian actress demands government-assisted suicide to cure depression. And it's been too much already. It's enough. I want to die. I wasn't going to cover the article yesterday that said there are prisoners in Canadian prisons who are electing to kill themselves. This MAID program in Canada is going way too far morally. It's just open to anybody who wants to die. Come on in. We'll take care of you. Just sign away your organs and we'll kill you. That's the state for you. Self-induced genocide. It's ridiculous. But the funny thing is like, oh, you're a little depressed? Here, take this medication. Oh, it makes you want to commit suicide? Here, we'll just do it for you. Imagine if Hitler had that. Here, we're going to oh, you don't feel good? We're going to give you a little pill. Oh, it makes you want to commit suicide now? Here, we'll offer that alternative, that solution. Fox News, 2 African nations ban American citizens in diplomatic tit for tat following Trump administration move. The move comes as Sahel nations pursue closer ties with Russia amidst security challenges, Islamic insurgencies. So it's Mali and Burkina Faso. Trump had put travel restrictions on Chad, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Libya, Niger, Republic of Congo, Sierra Leone, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan, all because they harbor militants. They're obviously poor countries, but they have, their own issues. I don't know why Mali and Burkina Faso. You don't want American tourists to come? Okay. You don't want white people? There's no real justification for that move. Washington Post. Iranian protests sparked by economic woes quickly spread across country. This is the color revolution that Perry was talking about last night, that obviously spurred by, Israel and Western nations. Story goes on to say, the lead says anti-government demonstrations erupted in Iran last week with initial protests by shop owners in the capital Tehran over the plummeting value of the Iranian currency, spreading by Wednesday to students, workers, and other elements of society across the country. Well, it's a color revolution because if you know what that is they easily call out people through social media. That the Western intelligence agencies are all over social media, if you didn't know. And that's how they launched the Arab Spring, was through Twitter and the Center for Nonviolent Protest, Nonviolent Action. In any case, that's what they do. So this is just another Arab Spring, but they're launching it in Tehran. They've done this several times recently, but they always leave the Iranians out to dry when the government cracks down. Which leads us to our next headline from PJ Media. Trump speaks out about protests in Iran and issues warning. Trump made it clear that not going to talk about overthrowing a regime. The nationwide demonstration have once again engulfed Iran have ample justification. They've got tremendous inflation. Their economy is busted. Their economy is no good. Well, that's the first phase. You put people in a desperate position. Even psychologically, if you put people in a desperate position psychologically, they're more prone to act out. And then if you just give them a trigger, they'll do it. All you have to do is, on social media, pose as a friend and say, hey, come do this. It's easy. It's group dynamics. If you understand how peers, groups influence the individual, and how peers, individuals influence groups, etc. You'll understand. And that's what intelligence is all about, is psychological manipulation. I mean, obviously there's kinetic action as well, but that's always as a last resort. You try to mind control people into doing what you want. And if they don't, or if they pose some sort of serious threat, you just take them out. Usually in a way that could be conflated or misconstrued or ambiguous. And that's what intelligence agencies want to do. That's what they're doing with Candace Owens. You make everything ambiguous. I don't know what happens. I need to find the answer. Then you're led in misdirection. Which brings us to the next article. International Business Times, Putin residents attack. Russia claims 90 Ukraine drones targeted the president. Russia claims Ukraine launched 90 drones at Vladimir Putin's home. Zelensky says it's a false flag. No mainstream media, Western mainstream media, is reporting this accurately, certainly. It's all alleged. Is it? Here you have President Trump making serious headway in a peace negotiation, and then all of a sudden you have this attack. Oh, it's just an excuse. Putin's making it up so he doesn't have to sign the peace accord. Putin wants peace. Putin just doesn't want NATO up his ass. And land-based land-to-sea missiles all along Ukrainians' Black Sea coast. Story goes on to say, Russia claims Ukraine drone attack on Putin residence sparks denial. Moscow's assertion came through Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who insisted every drone was intercepted before reaching its intended target, yet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky swiftly rejected the Kremlin narrative. I believe it. I mean, just the timing, I believe it. Because what happens next? UK Metro. Moscow plunged into darkness after successful drone attack by Ukraine. Moscow plunged into darkness after successful drone attack by Ukraine. So does this fit into Putin's narrative? So yesterday or the day before yesterday, there's a drone attack on Putin's residence, and now there's a drone attack on Moscow's electrical grid. First of all, I don't believe they should be striking inside Russia. This should be a territorial dispute with the war going on in Ukraine. If you're trying to get Russia out of Ukraine, then target Russia's forces in Ukraine. As soon as you start striking inside Russia, that widens the war, obviously. But there's more. Going a little over. Zero hedge. The Brits want the Poles to contain Russia in the Baltic Sea. The Polish defense minister announced in late November that his country will buy 3 diesel-electric submarines from Sweden. It was assessed that the UK aims to entrench its influence in Estonia in order to lead the Arctic-Baltic front. Warning about British-Ukrainian false flag provocation at sea. Scandinavia experienced a Russian drone scare. That was a series of false flags that were justifying a potential crackdown on Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic and in the Arctic. And then we're going to close out here with another zero hedge. Another dangerous milestone shows Putin is anything but paranoid regarding Russia's intent. Went a little over there. 7-8 minutes. That seems to be my window there. I always go over about 7-8 minutes. I thought I'd get in within an hour, but 29 articles, 29 headlines we got to go through. Covered a lot of news right there. Just going back to that last Zero Hedge article, another dangerous milestone shows Putin is anything but paranoid regarding NATO's intent, which means the Europeans want all-out war against Russia. We know what this agenda is. It's to elicit a first nuclear strike by Russia on the United States, basically decapitating the United States military, allowing for a Chinese communist hegemony with its vassal states in the West. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically every fucking day. So resist like your life depends on it, because it certainly does. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. on Rumble and YouTube, other social media platforms as well. And check out episode 132 of Tuesdays with Perry. Went live last night. Check it out on my channels. All right, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you. Respect.
I'm an American. I have rights.
Less than 3% of you people read books.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.